He transformed a tiny creature into a fierce predator. Now the tribe's princess has no choice but to follow his lead. The storm came without warning, crashing against the research outpost with an intensity that no one had expected. Rain poured in sheets, acidic droplets sizzling against the windows. The violet sky above churned with a wild energy, lightning streaking across the heavens, painting the alien landscape below in brief, ghostly flashes. Lieutenant Commander Ethan Hope stood in front of the viewport, his gaze fixed on the chaotic beauty of Proximus. It had been 3 months of routine, cataloging alien flora and fauna for Earth's exploration program. But today felt different. The air was thick with anticipation, and something about the planet's pulse felt off. "Sir," Specialist Chiver's voice crackled over the comms, cutting through the distant rumble of the storm. "You need to see this." Ethan's hand instinctively reached for the control panel. "What is it, Chivers?" "The seismic readings, they're off the charts, and it's in Sector 7. Ethan's heart rate picked up. "Natural or something else?" "We don't know yet, sir," Chivers responded. "But it's causing massive ground instability. There's a sinkhole forming about 2 clicks north." A pulse of unease traveled through Ethan. The calm of the past months had just shattered in an instant. "Get the rover ready," he said firmly, already moving to suit up. "We're heading out." There was a hesitation in Chivers' voice. "Protocol, sir. We should wait for the storm to pass." "I know protocol," Ethan snapped, sealing his helmet with a click. "Get the rover ready, Chivers. We can't wait." Minutes later, the rover lurched over the rough terrain, its reinforced frame absorbing the violent jolts of the landscape. The storm had worsened. Acidic rain hammered down, streaking the windows and making everything outside seem like a blur of moving shadows. The world felt alive in a way that was alien to Ethan, a raw, untamed force of nature. They reached the coordinates a short while later. The sight that greeted them made Ethan stop the rover in its tracks. There just ahead was a massive sinkhole, stretching wide enough to swallow a small building. The edge of the hole seemed jagged, and there was something strange beneath the surface. The headlights of the rover cut through the rain, casting an eerie glow on something hidden in the depths. It shimmered, catching the light in a way that made Ethan's skin prickle. "That's no natural formation," Chivers muttered, his voice tight with unease. "Is that a structure?" Ethan squinted, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The walls inside the hole were smooth, almost like glass, but the material had an unnatural glow to it, pulsing with a strange energy. It didn't belong here. "Could be ancient tech," Ethan said, trying to keep his voice steady. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew it was far more than that. There was something almost sentient about it. "We need to get a closer look," he decided. They suited up and climbed out of the rover, securing themselves with tether lines. The wind howled around them, but Ethan pressed forward, moving cautiously toward the sinkhole. With each step, the ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble. Something was shifting below. As they neared the edge, Ethan caught a movement in the corner of his eye. Something small. He froze. A creature. No bigger than the size of his hand, it was curled up in the corner of the collapsed chamber, its blue fur almost glowing against the dark backdrop of the earth. Its eyes, icy blue, sharp, locked onto Ethan, and something in the creature's gaze held him in place. "What is that?" Chivers asked, his voice muffled by the comms. He moved to pull out his scanner, but Ethan didn't respond right away. The creature's eyes were intelligent, studying Ethan with a mix of curiosity and fear. It was injured, blood, or something like it, pooled around its flank where a wound had torn through its small body. Before Ethan could react, the ground shook violently. The chamber around them groaned and cracked. "We need to go now," Ethan yelled, grabbing Chivers by the arm and yanking him toward the rope. But something stopped him. He couldn't look away from the creature. It seemed to be waiting, almost like it wanted him to help it. Without thinking, he scooped it up, tucking it into the specimen pouch on his suit. The tiny body felt warm and fragile against his chest as they rushed back toward the rover. They barely made it out before the entire structure above them collapsed. A deafening crash echoed through the storm as the sinkhole imploded, sending a shockwave that rocked the rover. The vehicle swerved but held steady. Inside, Ethan's heart raced, not just from the adrenaline, but from something deeper. The creature in his pouch shifted, its heartbeat matching his own in a steady rhythm, almost like it was alive in a way that no normal creature should be. Back at the outpost, Ethan stood in his quarters, staring down at the tiny creature in his hands. The science team was eager to examine it, but Ethan felt a strange protectiveness toward it. "It needs medical attention first," he insisted, his voice firm. The creature looked up at him with those same intelligent eyes. As the storm continued to batter the base, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary discovery. The bond between them had already started to form, an invisible thread pulling them together. But why him? And what did this creature mean? The answers, he knew, were just beginning to unfold. A bond like no other. The days that followed felt like a blur. Ethan could feel it, the weight of something strange and unspoken settling around him. Cobalt, the creature he had rescued from the depths of the sinkhole, was no longer the tiny, helpless thing he had found. Its growth was rapid, almost unnatural, and the change wasn't just physical. The bond between them had already started to form, an invisible thread pulling them together in ways Ethan couldn't fully understand. The first sign came 2 days after he'd taken the creature back to his quarters. Cobalt, now the size of a small dog, seemed to grow stronger with each passing hour. Its vibrant blue fur, once soft and fragile, had started to ripple with muscle beneath it. Ethan couldn't ignore the way the creature watched him, those intelligent, icy blue eyes studying him, almost like it was reading his thoughts. It wasn't just an animal anymore. It was something far more alive. It wasn't just Cobalt's physical transformation that bothered Ethan. It was the dreams, the strange visions that plagued him as he tried to sleep. Night after night, his mind was flooded with vivid images of an ancient civilization. Green-skinned humanoids with silver hair walked through grand, open halls, their eyes sharp and commanding. Massive creatures, beasts of blue fur like Cobalt, stood guard over intricately carved temples. Ethan could hear their voices, a language he couldn't understand, yet somehow he felt the meaning deep in his bones. One night the dreams became more intense. He found himself standing in an ancient courtyard, surrounded by towering stone statues of guardians, their eyes glowing like Cobalt's. Then the face of a woman appeared. She was beautiful, regal, her silver hair shimmering in the light of 2 suns. She looked at Ethan with piercing emerald eyes, as if she knew him, as if she had been waiting for him. The visions always ended the same way, with the sound of a distant, rumbling growl. He woke up in a cold sweat, heart pounding, unsure of what he had just experienced. But there was one thing he knew for certain: whatever these dreams meant, Cobalt was at the center of them. Ethan stared down at the creature curled up at the foot of his bed, still sleeping peacefully. The rapid growth was a mystery in itself, but the bond, he could feel it now, an undeniable connection that tugged at him from the very core of his being. There was a word for it, a word he didn't want to admit: telepathic. He was sharing something with Cobalt, something beyond mere instincts or emotions. They were linked, and whatever this bond was, it was only getting stronger. The following morning, he made a decision. It was time to share his concerns with someone else. "Commander Hope, you wanted to see me." Captain Harrington's voice came through the comms, pulling Ethan from his thoughts. Ethan stood up and paced his small quarters. He hadn't told anyone about the dreams yet. He hadn't even fully processed them himself. But with the growing connection between him and Cobalt, he could no longer ignore it. He needed answers. He walked into the command center, where Captain Harrington was already waiting. The captain was a no-nonsense kind of guy, with a stern face and a deep voice that could cut through steel if he wanted it to. "Sir, what's this about?" Harrington asked, raising an eyebrow. Ethan hesitated, trying to find the right words. "I've been having strange dreams, and I think they're connected to the creature." Harrington's eyes narrowed. "What creature?" Ethan sighed. "The one I found in the sinkhole, Cobalt." Captain Harrington frowned. "You're talking about a small animal, something that's injured and needs care, right?" "That's what I thought," Ethan replied, his voice firm. "But something's wrong. It's growing faster than any species I've ever seen. And the bond between us, it's not just physical, I think it's more. These dreams, they feel real. They're not just dreams. They're memories, I think, memories of a civilization, of a species that's tied to Cobalt." Harrington stood up and moved to the window, his face serious. "Ethan, I don't know what you're talking about, but you need to understand that whatever this creature is, it's not just your responsibility. It's a matter of Earth command now." Ethan clenched his fists. "I know, but I can't just hand it over. There's something more going on here, something we don't understand." The captain turned back to face him. "What exactly do you think this creature is, Commander?" "I don't know yet," Ethan admitted. "But I think Cobalt is connected to something much bigger. It's not just some native species, it's something else. And whatever it is, it's reaching out to me." Just then an alarm blared across the command center. The lights flickered, and the screens flashed with red warnings. "What the hell?" Harrington muttered as he glanced at the readouts. "What's going on?" "Unknown vessel approaching," came the voice of Lieutenant Preston, the communications officer. "Non-terrestrial design. It's on an intercept course." Ethan's stomach tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means we've got company," Harrington said grimly, striding toward the control panel. "Ready the defense systems." But even as the ship's incoming signal was detected, something inside Ethan told him that this wasn't just another random event. The creature, the dreams, the connection, it was all leading to something bigger. And the universe was about to come knocking on their door. The princess and the prophecy. The message came just as the tension in the base reached its breaking point. For days, Ethan had been trying to process what was happening with Cobalt, the creature that was no longer just a discovery, but a key to something much larger. The bond between them deepened with every passing hour, as if something in the universe had been waiting for them to meet. But he didn't have time to understand it all, not when strange visions filled his mind, and an unsettling presence seemed to loom over the research outpost. It was late when the call came in. A low, rhythmic hum echoed through the command center, and Lieutenant Preston's voice crackled over the intercom. "Commander, you're needed at the bridge. Now." Ethan's heart raced. "What's happening?" "A ship, it's not ours. It's approaching from beyond our sensor's range. She paused. "It's Vidian." Ethan froze, his pulse quickened. "Vidian, as in the Vidian Empire." The comms officer confirmed with a stiff nod, though her voice betrayed her unease. "Yes, sir. They're hailing us." For a moment everything seemed to stop. The Vidians were an ancient, reclusive species, known for their immense power and mystery. There had been whispers, even among the highest echelons of Earth Command, but no one had expected contact. Not now. "On screen," Ethan ordered, his voice low, his mind racing. The screen flickered to life, revealing a sleek, iridescent ship with curves like liquid metal flowing across the dark void of space. The ship pulsed with an inner light, as if it were alive. But it was the figure standing in front of the ship's command console that caught Ethan off guard. She was tall, her skin a smooth, deep green that shimmered faintly under the ship's glow. Her hair was long, silver, and flowing like molten light. The eyes that met Ethan's through the viewport were sharp, intelligent, piercing emerald green, full of authority. She was beautiful, regal, and her presence was overwhelming. "I am Princess Ferrara of the Vidian Collective." Her voice rang out, melodic yet commanding. "You have something that belongs to us." Ethan's breath caught in his chest. The name of her people alone sent a ripple of tension through his body. The Vidians. They were legends, powerful, intelligent, and incredibly private. But what could they possibly want with him? We're a research outpost, Ethan began, trying to steady his racing heartbeat. We've been cataloging alien life forms. We haven't taken anything that belongs to anyone else. Ferrara's gaze sharpened and she stepped closer to the screen, her eyes never leaving Ethan. You are mistaken, Commander. You have something that belongs to the Vidian people, a guardian cub, stolen from us. Stolen? Ethan felt his stomach tighten. What do you mean, this creature? I found it. It was injured, lying in the ruins of a collapsed structure. It wasn't taken. Ferrara's expression shifted subtly, but only for a second. It was a brief flicker of disbelief, and then the weight of something ancient and powerful pressed down on her words. No, that creature is a guardian sacred to our people. It is not an animal. It is a being of immense power. Its bond is meant only for the royal bloodline of Vidia, and you, Commander, have violated the natural order by bonding with it. Ethan's head spun. Bonding? What are you talking about? Ferrara's eyes never wavered. The Guardians choose their companions by a resonance that can only occur between those of our bloodline and the Guardian species. It is a sacred pact, and yet somehow your connection to it is undeniable. You have bonded with it as though you are one of us. Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't ignore what had been happening with Cobalt, the way their bond had formed so quickly, so inexplicably. He had known there was something strange about it, but this was something else entirely. I don't understand, Ethan said slowly, his voice filled with confusion and concern. How is this possible? It's just an animal, a creature from this planet. It is no mere creature, Ferrara replied, her voice softer now but full of an undeniable weight. It is a guardian cub meant to protect our people, meant to be bonded only with the chosen. The bond you share is unnatural. It threatens to disrupt the balance of our entire society. Ethan's heart pounded. What do you mean by disrupt the balance? And why are you telling me all this now? Ferrara stepped back, her gaze turning cold. Because you are now at the center of a prophecy long hidden, a truth that our people have kept from generations. You, Commander Hope, are not just an outsider who stumbled upon a creature. You are part of a larger story, one that has been written in the stars long before you arrived. Ethan's mind was reeling. A prophecy? How was he connected to all of this? And why did he feel a sudden sense of recognition, like the words Ferrara spoke were calling to something deep inside him? Ferrara's eyes softened for a moment, as if contemplating something deeply personal. The Guardians were created to protect against a darkness, an ancient force that threatens not just our people but all life in this galaxy. But the royal family has twisted their purpose, used them for control. The true bond. It was never meant to be limited to one bloodline. The screen flickered again as Ferrara's image shifted slightly, her presence growing more commanding. I'm here to reclaim what is ours, the guardian cub and the one who has bonded with it. You, Commander Hope, have been chosen. The bond you share with the Guardian is more than a mistake. It is the key to unraveling a truth we have hidden for centuries. Ethan felt the weight of her words settle heavily on his chest. This was no accident. He wasn't just caught up in some strange twist of fate. This was bigger. Ferrara's expression hardened once again. You will come with me. We must return to Vidia, where the truth will be revealed. You will understand your place in all of this, and together we will ensure the survival of both our peoples. Ethan's mind spun as he processed her words. Survival, prophecies, guardians. He had thought that finding Cobalt would be the most important discovery of his career, but now he was staring at the precipice of something much, much larger. I'm not sure I have a choice, Ethan replied, his voice a mixture of determination and confusion. No, Ferrara said, you don't. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Ethan standing in the silence of the command center. The storm still raged outside, but the real battle was just beginning. And whatever lay ahead, it was clear. This wasn't just about Earth anymore. This was about a war, a prophecy, and a bond that had the power to change everything. The secrets beneath Vidia. Ethan stood at the viewport, watching the stars streak by as the Vidian transport carried him deeper into the heart of a mystery he wasn't prepared to face. Princess Ferrara had made it clear. The stakes were higher than he could imagine. His bond with Cobalt was no mere coincidence. It was part of a much larger, ancient puzzle that the Vidian people had kept hidden for centuries. He had always thought of himself as a simple explorer, cataloging alien species for Earth's expansion. But now, he found himself at the center of an intergalactic conflict, surrounded by secrets that threatened to change the very fabric of reality. As the transport entered Vidia's atmosphere, the surface of the planet unfolded beneath him. Unlike anything he'd seen before, Vidia was a world of pristine beauty, its forests a glowing emerald green stretching across the horizon. Massive crystal spires rose from the landscape, catching the light of twin suns. Everything seemed to pulse with energy. It was almost as if the planet itself was alive, resonating with a power he couldn't quite explain. Ferrara stood beside him, her presence both calming and intense. "Welcome to Vidia," she said softly, her eyes reflecting the beauty of her homeworld. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He was too busy absorbing everything around him. There was something unnerving about this place, an unspoken sense of history, of a civilization that had existed for millennia, yet still felt so far beyond anything Earth had encountered. "We need to go to the Temple of Guardians," Ferrara said after a long pause, as if sensing Ethan's discomfort. "It's where the answers to everything lie, where you'll understand your bond with Cobalt and the role you're meant to play." Ethan's eyes flicked to Cobalt, now riding beside him. The creature had grown exponentially since the day he'd found it. Its powerful limbs rippled beneath its vibrant blue fur, and it was nearly as tall as Ethan's waist. There was a grace to its movements now, a wild, untamed strength. The bond between them had only deepened, and in those moments when Cobalt's gaze met his, Ethan could almost feel its thoughts, a strange but undeniable connection. But even more unsettling was how alive Cobalt felt now. This was no ordinary creature. This was something ancient, something that had purpose beyond the scope of Ethan's understanding. The transport touched down softly on a platform at the foot of the temple, its surroundings quiet and serene. The Temple of Guardians loomed in front of them, a massive structure made of living stone, with intricate carvings of beasts and celestial symbols etched into its surface. The air around it hummed with an energy Ethan could feel deep in his bones. It was ancient, but it felt alive, as though the temple itself was a conduit for something far greater. They stepped off the transport, and Ethan's boots crunched against the ground as they approached the temple entrance. His mind was spinning. The secrets of this world were buried here, he knew that. But what was the truth? What was it that Ferrara wasn't telling him? As they entered the temple, the massive stone doors groaned as they opened, revealing a long, dimly lit hallway. The walls were covered in more carvings, detailed depictions of creatures, guardians, and strange alien rituals. It felt like a sacred place, a repository of knowledge and power, but also one of great danger. This was no ordinary temple. Ferrara led him down the hall, and Ethan couldn't help but feel like they were walking through the pages of an ancient story. Every step echoed with a weight of centuries, of traditions long buried, of a truth the Vidians had kept hidden. He had so many questions, but he remained silent, waiting for her to speak. They reached a large, circular chamber at the center of the temple. In the middle was a pool of glowing liquid, casting an eerie light across the room. Standing near it was an elderly Vidian, his skin pale, almost translucent with age, but his eyes were sharp, filled with ancient wisdom. "This is Mentor Krell," Ferrara introduced, her voice soft but reverent. He is the keeper of our most sacred knowledge. He is the one who can help us understand what has happened between you and Cobalt." Krell turned to face them, his gaze resting on Ethan. There was something unsettling about his eyes, as if they had seen the rise and fall of civilizations, and nothing in this universe could surprise him anymore. His voice was raspy but strong, carrying an authority that Ethan felt even without understanding its full weight. "You are the human who has bonded with the Guardian," Krell said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "I have waited for you." Ethan's stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" "The prophecy," Krell said, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling knowing. "It speaks of an outsider, a being from beyond the stars, one who will form an unnatural bond with a guardian. This bond will break the chains of tradition, freeing the guardians from their ancient role as tools of power. This is no mere accident. This is destiny." Ethan's mind was racing. "Destiny? You're telling me this bond was meant to happen?" Krell nodded slowly. "Yes, the Guardians were never meant to be bound to the royal bloodline. That was a lie, one that was manipulated by the rulers of Vidia to maintain control. The Guardians were created to protect, not to serve. And you, human, have awakened the true purpose of the bond." Ethan turned to Ferrara, seeking clarity. "But you've been using them too, haven't you? The royal family, you've been controlling them." Ferrara's expression faltered just for a second. "It was not supposed to be this way," she said softly, "but the truth has been buried for generations. My family, my ancestors twisted the Guardian's role to secure power. The bond you share with Cobalt is something I never expected. It's beyond our control now." Ethan felt the gravity of her words, the weight of centuries of deception crashing down on him. The Guardians were not just protectors. They were something more, and the bond he shared with Cobalt was more than just an accident. It was part of something much larger. "The Guardians," Krell continued, his voice heavy with sadness, "were never meant to be pawns in a political game. They were created to fight a great darkness, an ancient force that threatens not just Vidia but all of existence. The royal family has kept this secret, hiding the true purpose of the Guardians while they used them to maintain control." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "A darkness? What do you mean?" "The Void Hunters," Krell said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The true enemies of the Guardians. They come from the void between stars, ancient predators who seek to consume all life. The Guardians were created to keep them at bay, but the royal family, they have forgotten their true purpose." Ethan's head spun. He had no idea what he had gotten himself into, but one thing was clear. The creatures, the Guardians, Cobalt, it was all connected to something far bigger than he could have ever imagined. And the secrets beneath Vidia's surface were darker than he could have guessed. "I've seen them," Ethan said slowly, his voice shaking. "In my dreams, these creatures, these Void Hunters, they're real." Krell's eyes hardened. "Yes, and they're coming. The Guardians have been waiting for their true bondmates to awaken, and now it is up to you, Commander Hope, to stop them." The shadows awaken. The air inside the ancient chamber felt heavier now, charged with something that had been dormant for millennia. Ethan stood in the heart of Vidia's sacred temple, listening to the echoes of Krell's words, and the weight of the truth hit him like a physical blow. Guardians were not just protectors. They were the planet's last line of defense against an ancient evil that was now stirring from the darkness. A battle he had never anticipated was beginning, and his bond with Cobalt was no longer a mere anomaly. It was a key, a crucial piece in a puzzle far larger than anything he could have imagined. He glanced at Ferrara, who stood beside him, her expression a mix of determination and sorrow. The truth about her ancestors, about her people, was like a jagged stone lodged in her chest. He could see it in the way her shoulders stiffened, in the way her green skin seemed to shimmer slightly under the dim light. This wasn't just a fight for control over the Guardians anymore. This was a fight for survival, a battle to save both their worlds from the shadow that had been waiting for so long. "We can't waste any more time," Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with a deep resolve. If what Krell says is true, if the Void Hunters are awakening, we have to prepare. Ferrara nodded, her gaze distant but her voice remained clear. The Guardians are restless. They can feel it just as we can. They're responding to the bond you share with Cobalt, but it's not enough. The Void Hunters are already testing our defenses. We need to find a way to stabilize the bond and strengthen the Guardians' power before it's too late. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he looked at Cobalt. The massive blue-furred creature stood at his side, now nearly as tall as Ethan himself, its once little form swollen with muscles and energy. It had become a guardian in its own right, its presence filling the room with a raw, untamed power. But Ethan could feel the unease coming from it, the way it shifted restlessly, its ice-blue eyes constantly scanning the room as if anticipating a threat. The bond between them was more than just emotional. It was a shared sense of urgency, a silent understanding that time was running out. "We need to go to the sanctuary," Ferrara continued, snapping Ethan from his thoughts. "It's the only place where the bond can be properly completed. If we don't act now, the power inside Cobalt will continue to grow uncontrollably, and the Guardian's power will destabilize. The Void Hunters will exploit that weakness." Ethan took a deep breath. He knew Ferrara was right. The sanctuary was a place of legend on Vidia, an ancient, sacred site where Guardians and their bondmates could perform the bonding ceremony to fully unlock their powers. It was their only chance, the only place where the ancient rituals could be completed and the Guardians' powers could be stabilized. But the journey would not be easy. The sanctuary lay deep in the heart of the Emerald Wilds, a vast, untamed wilderness filled with bioluminescent forests, towering rock formations, and dangerous creatures. The journey was treacherous, even for the most experienced Vidian travelers. "Then let's go," Ethan said firmly, his eyes never leaving Cobalt. The creature made a low, rumbling sound, almost like a growl, but it wasn't a threat. It was a sign of approval. Ferrara turned to Krell, who had remained silent, watching them with an unreadable expression. "Mentor Krell, we'll need your guidance. You know the path." Krell nodded slowly, his ancient face shadowed with concern. "The path is not for the faint-hearted. It is a journey that will test your strength, your resolve, and your bond. The Guardians will guide you, but only if the bond is true." Ethan's chest tightened at his words. There was so much more to this bond than he had realized. It wasn't just about sharing thoughts or emotions with Cobalt. It was about survival, about protecting the universe itself from an ancient evil. "We leave at once," Ferrara declared, her voice hardening with determination. "The Void Hunters are already moving. We don't have time to waste." Hours later, the transport sped through the dense forests of Vidia, its engines cutting through the night air. The world outside seemed to blur, the trees towering over them like silent sentinels. Ethan could feel the intensity of the journey in every fiber of his being. The further they traveled into the Emerald Wilds, the more the bond with Cobalt seemed to resonate. The creature was not just a companion anymore. It was a part of him, a connection he could no longer deny. Despite the urgency, Ferrara took a moment to speak. "Ethan, you must understand. The sanctuary is not just a place of power, it is a place of transformation. It will change you and Cobalt, but it will also strengthen your bond. It's the only way to prepare for what's coming." Ethan looked at her, her green skin glowing softly under the bioluminescent light of the surrounding trees. There was something deeply personal in her voice, something vulnerable. "Do you believe we can succeed?" he asked. Ferrara didn't hesitate. "I have to believe, for my people, for you, for all of us." But even as she spoke, Ethan noticed the flicker of doubt in her eyes. The further they went, the more the weight of the task at hand seemed to press down on her. The legend of the Guardians had been twisted by her ancestors, but that wasn't the only truth she was carrying. Ferrara had a role in all of this too, one that, just like Ethan's, was yet to be fully revealed. Just then Cobalt let out a low, rumbling growl. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The bond was growing stronger, more intense. He could feel it too, a surge of energy radiating from the creature. Ethan reached down and placed a hand on Cobalt's massive head, his fingers brushing against its cool blue fur. The bond was undeniable now, and as much as he feared the unknowns ahead, he knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened, he wouldn't face it alone. Neither would Ferrara, neither would the Guardians. They were ready. The final trial. The Emerald Wilds were a world of extremes. One moment the air was thick with the scent of wildflowers, the ground alive with soft, rhythmic pulses of bioluminescence. The next, it could turn into a nightmare of tangled roots, jagged rocks, and a silence so deep that it felt as if the planet itself was holding its breath. Ethan could feel every inch of the terrain beneath him, each step taken with a growing sense of urgency. They had been traveling for 2 days now, and the sanctuary was still far beyond reach. But the real danger wasn't the landscape. It was the creeping tension in the air. The bond between Ethan and Cobalt had become so intense, so inescapable, that Ethan could feel the creature's every emotion, every flicker of doubt or concern. Cobalt was struggling to control its own power growing larger, its muscles rippling beneath the glowing blue fur. The creature was on the edge of something immense and wild that could overwhelm them both if they didn't complete the ceremony soon. "Do you feel it?" Ferrara's voice cut through the stillness. She walked beside him, her hand resting lightly on Cobalt's shoulder, her gaze scanning the forest ahead. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "I do. It's like Cobalt is about to explode, but it's not just physical. It's like the bond itself is pushing against something we can't see." Ferrara's eyes flicked toward Cobalt, then back to Ethan. "The bond is changing you both. The sanctuary will stabilize it, but only if you're truly ready. Only if Cobalt is fully connected to you and you to him." They pressed forward, following the ancient path known only to Krell, the map to the sanctuary hidden in his ancient memories. The air felt charged, vibrating with an energy Ethan couldn't place. Cobalt was ahead of them now, its massive form moving through the underbrush with surprising grace. The creature had grown nearly twice its original size, and it seemed to hum with a deep, primal energy. It wasn't just a guardian anymore. It was something else entirely, something both powerful and untamed. Suddenly, without warning, Cobalt let out a sharp, rumbling growl. Ethan froze, his hand instinctively reaching for the weapon at his side. Ferrara was already moving, her hand outstretched toward the creature, her eyes narrowing in concentration. "It's not the Void Hunters," Ferrara murmured as if reading his thoughts, "but something is following us, something ancient." Ethan felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "What do you mean? What is it?" Ferrara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she motioned for them to move faster. "We have to get to the sanctuary before whatever is hunting us catches up. The bond, it's calling to something. But it's not Cobalt's power. It's something else. Something darker." Cobalt's growl deepened, and the ground beneath them seemed to tremble, the air thick with an unseen presence. Ethan's pulse quickened, but he pushed forward, trusting Ferrara and the creature who had become an unwilling ally in this dangerous game of fate. As they moved deeper into the wilds, the landscape around them began to shift. The trees grew taller, their trunks twisted in unnatural shapes, and the air became thick with an otherworldly mist. The path was narrowing, almost as if it were deliberately pushing them towards something. "Where are we?" Ethan asked, his voice low. "The heart of the wilds," Ferrara answered, her tone grim. "This is where the old magic lives, the same power that created the Guardians." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had heard stories about ancient forces that lay dormant within the wilds of Vidia, forces that the royal family had long since sealed away. But hearing it from Ferrara, hearing the urgency in her voice, made him realize just how little he knew about this world. Then through the mist, something moved. Ethan's instincts flared and he grabbed Ferrara's arm, pulling her back. A massive shadow loomed ahead. At first, Ethan thought it was just a trick of the fog, but as the figure came closer, it became clear. This was no illusion. Standing at least 3 meters tall, its form was covered in dark, rough scales, and its eyes, cold, yellow, and unblinking, locked onto them. Ethan's breath caught. This wasn't a guardian. It wasn't even a creature of Vidian origin. "It's a hunter," Ferrara whispered, her voice shaking. "One of the ancient enemies the Guardians were meant to fight." The creature let out a low, guttural growl, and before Ethan could react, it lunged. In an instant, the world erupted into chaos. Cobalt charged first, a blur of blue fur and muscle. The hunter recoiled, its claws slashing through the air with terrifying speed. Ethan barely had time to react as the ground trembled with the force of their battle. "Cobalt, stop!" Ferrara shouted, but her voice barely registered over the growl of the creatures. The Guardian was too far gone, too caught up in the primal instinct to protect. Ethan's heart pounded as he watched the battle unfold. Cobalt was fighting with everything it had, but it wasn't enough. This was no simple predator. This was a force of nature, ancient and terrifying. "Cobalt, please," Ethan shouted, his voice breaking through the roar of the battle. He ran forward, reaching out for the creature. "We need you to fight with us, not just for us." For a split second, the world seemed to stop. The hunter froze, Cobalt faltered. And then Ethan felt it, a sudden, overwhelming surge of power, a connection between him and Cobalt that surged like an electric current. It was as if the bond between them had just clicked, locking them together in a way he had never experienced before. The bond pulsed, glowing faintly around Cobalt's massive form, and suddenly the Guardian's eyes were focused. With a final, deafening roar, it leapt at the hunter, its claws flashing. In one swift motion, the beast was down. Ethan stood frozen, the weight of what had just happened crashing over him. The hunter was dead. But the price of that victory was clear. Cobalt's form shuddered, its muscles rippling with barely contained power. It had just unlocked something deep inside of itself, something raw and untapped, and now it was unstable. Ferrara rushed to Ethan's side, her eyes wide with realization. "You've completed the bond." Ethan looked at Cobalt. The creature's body was trembling, its energy spiraling out of control. "But what does this mean? What now?" "The bond has stabilized," Ferrara said softly, stepping closer to Cobalt. "But it's not just Cobalt who has changed. You have too. The bond has awakened something in you, something that makes you a part of this world. You're not just a human anymore, Ethan. You're part of the Guardians now." Ethan's heart sank as he took in her words. He had never asked for this, never wanted to be a part of something so vast, so dangerous. But there was no turning back now. And as the energy within Cobalt began to stabilize, Ethan knew that the true battle was only just beginning. The awakening of the Guardians. The sanctuary loomed before them, an ancient stone circle nestled between towering cliffs. The night sky stretched overhead, thick with stars, while the air around them hummed with a power Ethan could feel deep in his bones. For the first time since he'd arrived on Vidia, a strange sense of calm washed over him. The weight of the journey, the storms, the creatures, the betrayal seemed to lift just for a moment. But the calm was deceptive. He knew the true test was still ahead. Ferrara stood beside him, her eyes focused on the towering archway at the center of the sanctuary. The glow of bioluminescent moss illuminated her features, giving her an almost ethereal quality. Yet even in this sacred place, her face was shadowed by the burden of her people's secrets, her bloodline's manipulations. She had come so far, and now her future, and the future of Vidia, was inextricably linked with Ethan. "We're almost there," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile peace in the air. Ethan's heart beat faster as he looked at Cobalt, standing tall beside him. The Guardian's glowing blue fur rippled with raw power, its massive frame still vibrating with the energy from their previous battle. But now, Cobalt was calm, almost serene. Its bond with Ethan had reached its peak, stabilizing its once uncontrollable power. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't quite ready for what was to come. "The bond is complete," Ferrara murmured, reading his thoughts. "But it's only the first step. Now we need to unlock its true potential. The Guardians must be united once more as they were in ancient times. And you are the key." Ethan looked at her, a mixture of confusion and fear clouding his thoughts. "I'm still not sure I understand. What exactly are we unlocking here? What's at stake?" Ferrara's gaze softened. "The Guardians were never just protectors of our people. They were designed to combat an ancient enemy, a force from beyond the stars. The Void Hunters. That's why the bond is so important. The Guardians can only reach their full potential when they're bonded to those who understand their purpose. But that purpose has been lost, twisted, hidden by my family's rule." Ethan felt a chill race down his spine. The Void Hunters. He had seen them in his dreams. Ancient creatures of shadow that hunted the living, a darkness so vast it threatened to consume entire worlds. And now, those creatures were stirring once again, drawn to the power Cobalt and the other Guardians possessed. "The Guardians must unite," Ferrara continued, her voice steady now. "To fight the Void Hunters, to protect Vidia and all the worlds they've sworn to defend." Ethan nodded, though a sense of dread tightened in his chest. "And how do we do that? How do we unlock their power?" Ferrara motioned toward the center of the sanctuary, where the ancient stone circle stood. Each of the stone pillars was covered in intricate symbols and glowing runes, some familiar, some alien. The energy in the air seemed to thicken, swirling around them like a living thing. "This is the place," she said softly, "where the true bonding ceremony must take place. It's the only way to awaken the full power of the Guardians." Ethan took a deep breath and stepped forward, Cobalt following closely behind. His hand brushed against the stone pillars as they approached, and immediately a surge of energy pulsed through him, deep and resonant. It was as if the stones were calling to him, beckoning him to complete something that had been forgotten for centuries. Ferrara followed, standing beside him. "You must trust the bond. Trust that what's happening now is part of the prophecy. The power of the Guardians is linked to the stars, to the very core of Vidia. Your bond with Cobalt is the catalyst. Without it, nothing will happen." Ethan looked down at Cobalt, who was now standing at the center of the stone circle, its massive form glowing with a strange, ethereal light. There was a calmness in its eyes, but also something else, an expectation, a deep awareness of what was about to unfold. He didn't fully understand the magic that surrounded them, the ancient energy that hummed beneath his feet, but he knew one thing for sure. He had no choice but to trust in the bond. It had already changed him, had already pulled him into a future that was no longer just his own. And now, it was time to face whatever came next. He stepped into the center of the circle, kneeling beside Cobalt. Ferrara knelt beside him, her hands resting gently on the stones as she closed her eyes. The air around them seemed to shimmer, the power of the sanctuary coming alive. Ethan could feel the connection to Cobalt grow stronger, pulsing, breathing like two hearts beating in unison. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them cracked, a surge of energy ripping through the stones. The entire sanctuary seemed to come alive, the stone pillars glowing brighter and brighter, their energy feeding into Cobalt, into Ethan, into Ferrara. It was as if the very soul of Vidia was awakening and the Guardians, long dormant, were stirring from their ancient slumber. Cobalt's form began to shift, its massive body rippling with new strength. Its eyes glowed brighter, its fur shining like a beacon in the growing light. Ethan could feel the power coursing through him now, an overwhelming wave of energy that nearly knocked him off his feet. It was like nothing he had ever felt before, raw, primal, and ancient. The bond had reached its final phase, and with it, Cobalt's power exploded outward in a brilliant burst of blue light. For a moment, Ethan couldn't see anything but that blinding light. But then, as the light faded, he looked around. The sanctuary had transformed. The once quiet forest was now alive with guardians, massive blue-furred creatures standing tall and proud, their eyes glowing with the same intensity as Cobalt's. They were no longer just protectors. They were warriors, awakened and united, ready to face the Void Hunters. Ferrara stood beside him, her face a mask of awe and relief. "It's done," she whispered. "The Guardians are united once more." But even as they reveled in the success of the ceremony, Ethan knew the battle was far from over. The Void Hunters were still out there. And now, with the full power of the Guardians awakened, they would have to face the darkness that threatened everything. Ethan stood, his hand resting on Cobalt's shoulder, feeling the power of the bond surging between them. He knew what had to be done. "It's time," he said, his voice steady. "Let's finish this." The Guardians, now fully awakened, roared in unison, the sound echoing through the sanctuary like a challenge to the dark forces lurking beyond the stars. The fight for Vidia, for the universe itself, had just begun. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon for more amazing videos.